Okay. I'm Steve Greene with Greenville Technical College, and I'm presenting on ABC XYZ analysis for inventory optimization, and about 25 minutes long, and then open it for questions and answers after that. Of inventory management. So we want to be in the blue square. Next slide, please. So more definitions. There's a lot of different ways to analyze inventory. This presentation, we're going to look at three. The first one is most familiar with people. It's taught very much with APICS and ASCM. It's ABC analysis, which is the classification technique. Of inventory items into three groups, A, B, and C, based on their annual usage value. The second one, which isn't as well known, is XYZ analysis, and that's one of the reasons why I started writing, because I didn't know it that well. And then someone called me and said, hey, ABC is great, but you're missing a lot. And so I looked into it further and got the XYZ. So that's a technique that classifies inventory items based on three groups, X, Y, and Z, and it's based on demand variation. And the cream of the crop of this is combining ABC and XYZ analysis. So that's going to improve your framework to develop and refine inventory policies, systems, and procedures to implement best practices. So with that, you're going to focus efforts on key SKUs, for both forecasting and managing S&OP processes. So we're going to get into ABC analysis somewhat quickly. This is a nice chart here. As you can see, you've got the classes A, B, and C. So class A is only going to be 10% of your number of SKUs in your inventory. But that 10% is going to be 70% of the total value of your inventory. The class B is 20% of the SKUs that you have in inventory, and then 20% of the value. The class C is 70% of your inventory, the SKUs, but only 10% of the value. So you can see that we really want to have more control or stock control on the class A items because they're more value. And then the delivery cycle, that is how your replenishment. So you want to get those class A items on a weekly basis in. The control report is your inventory counts, your cycle counting. You want to have very accurate counts with that because of the value. And the forecast should be very accurate in Class A items. Conversely, on C, because they don't have the value, you can have looser stock control with that. Your delivery cycle can be much longer, could be 3 or 6 months. And then your control report, or when you take the inventory, could be on a quarterly basis. And the forecast can be very rough with those. So with ABC inventory analysis, it's about having better control over high-value inventory. It improves stock availability, reduces production losses, and lowers costs. And it's used to determine the appropriate inventory processes for each of those three classes. The key thing about ABC analysis is you don't want to get stocked out of A items. So we want to avoid stockouts of those high-value items. And an item's value is based on the annual usage value. And that is a user-defined criteria. So that one is going to be a little bit more abstract, in which we will get in 2 slides. I'll come back to that usage value. Insights for ABC analysis, it gives you a better understanding of where to place an item in its product life cycle to determine the correct safety stock levels. If a Class A items are required more frequently, then you have larger reductions in safety stock costs. And then finally, to facilitate service level requirements, if you're a company that supplies larger companies and you pride yourself on just-in-time delivery, then you might want to think about getting a distribution or a warehouse near your larger customers. And in that location, you should stock your super movers, which are going to be your A class items, and then some of your B class items. So let's look at the annual usage value. I mean, this is a user-defined criteria. So for the American Red Cross and their blood supplies, they're going to have different criteria about what value is. And BMW will have different criteria what value is, and Michelin and Apple phones will have different criteria. So those are 6 categories of criteria that a user can use. And remember, this is in no specific order. The first one is going to be the revenue or the profit that comes in from the inventory item. The second one is cost of goods sold, and that is based on annual turnover of inventory, not the item price. Third is customer sales. Fourth is customer service level requirements. And for an example for that is any supplier that goes to BMW, if they are late on a delivery and they slow that line down, there's going to be penalties for that. I mean, I think these Toyota, I don't know if you have that figure, like $100,000 a minute of being late or slowing down that line or something like that. So you want to make sure that you have Class A inventory items to make sure that you have service level requirements set and make sure and follows that contract that you have with an OEM. The next one is an item's relationship to other items. So let's say you have a Class C item is paired with a Class A item, but you need to have those together. So what that does is bumps up the value of the Class C item to be a Class A item. Okay, and then the last one is the item's location in a product's life cycle. So in a product life cycle, you're going to have initial stage and the growth stage. If you have an item in the growth stage, it's going to be of higher value than it is later on in the decline stage. Okay, so we're going to look at audience question. Is it accurate to classify a high-priced item that is sold sporadically and infrequently as a Class A item? Sorry I didn't have a BMW in there. So is a Maserati always going to be a Class A item? That kind of depends, right? About the demand variation, the amount of customers that are going to buy it. So those are infrequent sales. A Mustang, you're going to have more buyers. You're going to have more demand because the value or the item is priced less. And then a Yugo, that is going to be a very basic car. You're going to have lots of demand as far as customer segments go. So that demand should be steady, and you may be able to forecast that a little bit better, more reliably than a Maserati.
Something like a jet engine, perhaps?
Yeah. So as we see, ABC analysis has its drawbacks. ABC analysis does not factor in demand variation. So if you have 2 items with the same high usage value, but with different demand patterns, that may be subject to the same inventory policies and processes, which may not be appropriate. So we need to factor in, you can't just have ABC alone by itself. You need to have some other factor. ABC by itself is a little bit too simple. So there's other considerations for that. If a supply chain manager just need to decide what criteria that they're going to use, determine item value. So what's the best way to classify a new product that will soon be launched? Is it going to be automatically considered a Class B item, or could it be used a different category, which some people use Class L for launch? If a company has a distribution network, each node could have its own ABC classification. So there may be different ABC classes for the same item in the same company. So that can be kind of confusing. And then the final one is, in a dynamic marketplace, product sales can be erratic. So items can move quickly between ABC classes. But you don't want to change the ABC item classifications every month. In fact, that could be an audience question at the end. If you don't want to do it every month, how often are you going to change it? Okay, Wayne? So with those drawbacks and considerations, we're going to pair ABC analysis with the second method of inventory analysis, which I'm covering tonight, XYZ analysis. So it's a framework that classifies items into 3 category groups based on the amount of demand variation and how much the actual use deviates from their forecast. So if you see the chart here, the X items, which will be this green line, customer orders are frequent, perhaps daily, demand variation is low, and demand is forecastable. It's a very accurate forecast for those. So the Y items, which will be the blue line here, the customer orders are less frequent, perhaps every few weeks or less. Demand varies more, and it's harder to forecast. So that may have some seasonality in that demand. But regardless of it's going to demand varies more. And the Z items, which is the zigzagging red line, the orders are infrequent and sporadic, and it has the most demand variation, and it's most difficult to forecast. Okay, so the question is, how do we measure demand variation? That is measured by the coefficient of variation, which I'll say is C of V, so which is standard deviation divided by the mean of the demand data set. The larger the coefficient of variation, the more erratic the demand. So I don't know if you all can see this spreadsheet here. If your CFV is less than or equal to 0.1, then you have a class X item, which is the green cells. If your coefficient is greater than or equal to 0.1, but less than or equal to 0.25, then you have the gold Y class. And if your CFV is greater than or equal to 0.25, then you have the Z items, which is the most variation, which is the red cells. It's important to note that the C of V does not have to be 0.1, of course. It could be anything. I use 0.1 because this is what reflected in the spreadsheet. But a lot of times the C of V is going to be 0.25 or 0.3. So what is the benefits of using XYZ analysis? It improves your forecasting accuracy. It reduces the stockouts, especially of the Class A items, increases stock turnover, and reduces the stock obsolescence. And finally, it helps to clarify the levels for items in the volatile demand. Okay, so we got this all together. We have the ABC and the XYZ, so those were the first 2 methods. And the third method is the cream of the crop. This is the ABC and XYZ analysis. The best way to describe this is the 9-box grid. So you see from going down in the columns, the A column is going to be the highest value based on annual usage. And then the lesser values are going to be column B and column C. And then for the rows, the X is going to be the least variation in demand and the most reliable forecasting. And that, as you progress down in the rows, that's going to be more demand, more variable demand, and forecasting is least reliable, less reliable. So there you go. You've got the columns and the rows. Now we're going to take this a step further. We're going to look at individual cells, and we're going to pick out 3. If you're looking at Class AX items, these should never be out of stock. You don't want to be out of stock of Class A items. They're high consumption value. Their demand is pretty even. It doesn't vary very much. And then you have reliable forecasts. So those are the good, valuable AX class items. The AZ class items would not likely be inventoried because they could result from a large one-time use or a purchase. So they have, even though they have a high consumption demand, or value, sorry, their demand is sporadic, it's variable, and then forecasting is less reliable. Class CZ, so these are inventory liabilities. These are the problem children. So we have a low consumption value, the demand is very variable, sporadic, and then the forecasting is unreliable, if not impossible. So using the combined ABC and XYZ analysis to optimize inventory, the managers can collaborate cross-functionally. We want to break down those silos. So the finance and production, sales, logistics, and procurement managers can get together and they can establish and use more effective rules and policies. So some of those policies and rules, I've noted 3 here, are the amount and timing of replenishment processes, the agreed upon level of buffer stocks, and the inventory control rules such as the cycle counting frequencies. So there's a reason why I put those in different colors and bolded and underlined, and we're going to see that in the next slide. We're coming back to the 9-box grid. So we're looking now at the policies, inventory policies based on those. So remember the red, the blue, and the green from the last slide, for your AX items, these are the ones you always want to have in stock. So you want to have automated replenishment of those items. The buffer can be relatively low because you know the forecasts are going to be reliable, the demand is going to be even and not variable, and then perpetual inventory. You're going to want to make sure you've got the right counts on those. So you're going to do those cycle counts maybe like once a week. Okay, so AZ class. Now this is the one that could result from a large one-time purchase, which could be sporadic or infrequent. So the replenishment, you're going to get that when the order is in. When someone gives you an order for it, that's when you're going to bring that into inventory. Now, you don't need a big buffer stock on this because the customer, if they're doing a lot, ordering a lot, and it's sporadic, then they understand that there's going to be lead times with that. Okay, so you don't need a lot of buffer stock on a Class AZ item. And since it's not stocked, there's really no counting frequency. The Class CZ items, these are the problem children. They're automated replenishment. There's a high buffer, and the reason where there may be, I said may be a high buffer is because the value is not that high, where your finance and your accounting folks are going to say, we don't want to tie inventory up in high value items that are infrequent and sporadic. But it's okay for a lower value item. Now, if you're BMW, you have suppliers that are going to provide the C items, the fasteners, the nuts, the bolts. Now, they're going to keep that inventory for you off-site, and and BMW or another OEM will go ahead and order that in. So if you do have a great supply network, you don't really need that much buffer stock. If your supply network isn't that great, then you need a high buffer, so safety first. Because the value of the CZ item is low, you don't really want to count washers. You don't want to count nuts and bolts. But what you can do is you can see it visually. You can see a pail, and you can say, oh, well, it's half full. I think it's time for it to replenish it. Or you just put it on a scale. Okay, it's 40 pounds. We don't need to order that anymore. So the 4 key benefits of ABC and XYZ analysis: breakdown of functional silos. Well, while factoring department needs. Talked about that a little bit on a previous slide. Your finance people and accounting people are going to say, we don't want to tie up working capital in inventory. So they want low inventory. And the salespeople want lots of inventory because they want to make sales and they want to keep their customers happy. Your production folks want inventory because they want to make sure that those lines are working. They want to have disruptions in line because they don't have the inventory for the MRP. The second area, and that's a segue. The second area is.
I remember the auditing I used to do, having to count washers, or giving me bad memories on the last slide.
Oh gosh, okay. Yes. Okay, so the second bullet is to optimize the trade-offs among the costs, risks, and benefits of holding inventory. And the third one is to better refine policies, systems, and processes to implement best practices. And the last one is better alignment of inventory with corporate strategic goals. Okay, that concludes the presentation. I'll be happy to provide the slides for you. This is my email address. Remember the E at the end of Greene, and then gbltec.edu. I have a number of articles and presentations that are based on my LinkedIn profile. So if you'd like to take a look at those, you can go ahead and look at those as well. I want to thank you for your attention, and I'll be happy to answer questions or entertain comments.